Recorded Books presents The Oregon Trail by Francis Parkman. Narrated by Adrian Cronauer. This recording is copyrighted 1986 by Recorded Books, Incorporated. In 1846, when Francis Parkman was just 23 years old, he and his fellow Boston Brahmin, Quincy Adams Shaw, undertook an expedition to the wild lands of the Rocky Mountains. Neither had much in the way of qualifications for the venture, besides a love for the wild and a desire to see for themselves the great far West with its savage Indians and multitudes of buffalo. Parkman was wealthy, a bit snobbish, and somewhat sickly. Not the kind of man you'd expect to take a perilous journey up the Missouri River from St. Louis to Fort Laramie in the Oregon Territory, traveling west along the Platte and then back east along the Arkansas, in what is now Wyoming and Colorado. Their tour, which lasted half a year, took place during a time of great change. The Mexican War had just broken out. The French Canadians had given up control of the Oregon Territory to the United States, and the westward movement that was to build a continental empire was only beginning. Soon gold would be discovered in California. Only extraordinary good fortune brought Parkman and Shaw back to the safety of civilization. They were traveling among the Indians in a year when the Sioux were still at peace with the white man. It wasn't to remain that way long, and peaceful Indians were as capable of violence as Indians at war. They traveled alone most of the time or with a small handful of companions, and were lucky beyond their knowledge to encounter no parties of deadly Comanches, Blackfeet, crows, or snakes. Parkman kept a notebook as he traveled, and from it he wrote his account. It was published 3 years later, in 1849. And now, The Oregon Trail.
Chapter 1. The Frontier. Last spring, 1846, was a busy season in the city of St. Louis. Not only were emigrants from every part of the country preparing for the journey to Oregon and California, but an unusual number of traders were making ready their wagons and outfits for Santa Fe. The hotels were crowded, and the gunsmiths and saddlers were kept constantly at work in providing arms and equipment for the different parties of travelers. Steamboats were leaving the levee and passing up the Missouri, crowded with passengers on their way to the frontier. In one of these, the Radnor, since snagged and lost, my friend and relative Quincy Adams Shaw and myself left St. Louis on the...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?